Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with a review of Evil Dead Rise, the latest chapter in the saga of Ashley Joanna Williams and his never-ending battle against the armies of the undead. And if you're saying right now that Ash isn't in the movie at all, you just gotta look harder, because trust me, Ash is totally in this movie.
What, you never saw a guy with a chainsaw hand before?
Okay, not really. Yeah, this is the first Evil Dead film without any Ash in it at all, and you might be saying that the 2013 film was the first without Ash, but that movie technically did have Ash in it with a very, very brief cameo in a post-credit scene.
Groovy.
They weren't willing to completely take the training wheels off yet and make an Evil Dead movie without Ash's blessing somewhere within it. Evil Dead Rise does have a Bruce Campbell cameo in it though, but it's just a voice briefly heard on a record. The director, Lee Cronin, has claimed that this voice is possibly a time-traveling Ash, but an ambiguous vocal cameo doesn't really count.
Look, maybe I didn't say every single little tiny syllable, no, but basically I said them, yeah.
Point is, though, Evil Dead Rise doesn't have Ash in it. Don't expect Ash anywhere. There's no post-credit scene where Ash calls somebody a primitive screwhead.
You got that?
If you're expecting anything like that anywhere in this movie, you'll be disappointed. What you should expect to see in Evil Dead Rise, though, is deadites. Good old-fashioned deadites, and lots of gross gore. And Evil Dead Rise satisfies in both of those departments. Here's my review of Evil Dead Rise. But first, I have a message from my sponsor. Me! Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested, and I thank you in advance.
Everybody here dies by dawn, Dad.
Evil Dead Rise is a standalone sequel that takes place somewhere within the Deadite multiverse, but it has no direct connections to any of the previous movies. This might come as a surprise because the lead of Evil Dead Rise, Beth, looks almost exactly like Mia from Evil Dead 2013, but no, they're different characters.
What's up, sis? Your little sister's being raped in hell!
The main character, Beth, finds out she's knocked up and seeks the guidance of the one person in her life who has it together, her older sister Ellie, a single mother who's raising 3 kids by herself in a condemned apartment building that will soon be demolished. Yeah, Ellie's the go-to candidate for life advice.
No matter how busy you ever got, you always found time for me.
After Ellie's kids grab some pizza from Henrietta's, a sudden earthquake opens up a hole in the apartment's garage, and one of the kids, Danny of course, descends into the hole and discovers a hidden vault containing a copy of Naturum de Monto, roughly translated the Book of the Dead, along with a vinyl recording of a helpful priest from the 20s translating the text, and Danny only happens to have a record player because he's practicing to become a DJ someday or something, I don't know. The series of events surrounding the reading of the book in the film are a little bit more of a stretch compared to just a pair of bored, edgy college dudes deciding to play a tape to spook their girlfriends. But I guess it's better than a 57-year-old man getting high and deciding to read the book again years later just because.
That's right.
And of course, the Kandarian demon is let loose, and the fun really begins when the demon possesses Ellie via off-screen defilement by an elevator's shaft.
Don't let it take my babies.
Admittedly, leading up to the carnage, I was pretty iffy about Evil Dead Rise. The film does have a pretty brutal cold open involving unrelated characters dealing with the dead in an isolated cabin setting just to start things off strong and familiar. But once we got to the movie's main cast with the family, I wasn't so into them. They're all just a touch too quirky, and their characters feel kinda forced. The rebellious oldest daughter, for instance, is instantly established as preparing for some protest of Labor Day or whatever, and she needs a certain shirt cleaned and keeps pestering her mom to clean it. And I'm just like, damn, clean it yourself, bitch. The son is, of course, practicing to be a DJ, I guess, and this is established by him mixing records for 5 minutes. It feels like they only made Danny a DJ in training to explain why he's able to play this vinyl record as like a zoomer, and it's just kinda unnecessary. You could kind of make his character something a little bit more than just DJ. The youngest child, Cassie, is a cutesy, whimsical little kid prone to flights of fancy, and is established as making a crude staff with a baby doll head taped on it that she calls Staffney. Beth herself is a technician for a touring punk band, but her thing, along with the pregnant thing, is having to deal with being called a groupie by her sister Ellie, who we don't get to know too much about before her possession beyond her being a mom, but she is shown playing with a tattoo gun, I think. Evil Dead Rise is just a little too preoccupied with setting up its characters in the first act, but it just doesn't feel organic or authentic. Instead of just focusing on the dynamics between the different members of this family, the film focuses on setting up their separate niches, and it just comes off as the guy writing the film having only a vague familiarity with the territory he's embarking on, writing about motherhood and expectant motherhood, and what are teen girls into these days? Protesting random shit, I guess. And with the movie's adorable little girl character in the mix, how could anybody be afraid to be a parent? They practically raise and entertain themselves, along with holding their own against the undead. There are some male characters besides Danny the DJ that live in the same hallway as the main cast, but they're even more weakly characterized and get killed mostly off screen. Of course, with Beth, she goes through a character arc where she starts out afraid to have a child and unsure of her future, and then through her ordeal, Beth discovers the power of motherhood protecting Cassie. Beth really fucks up protecting her other niece and nephew though, but they sucked anyway.
Don't let it take my babies.
I do gotta hand it to the director Lee Cronin endeavoring to write a mostly female horror film, but I can't help but feel the approach was a little misguided, especially in how it tries to be empowering through, the motherhood angle.
You'd be a good mom someday, Honeybath. You know how to lie to kids.
I'm all for Evil Dead not having Ash because I love the Deadites by themselves just fine, but if this series is gonna have a life beyond Ash, they need to have some better central characters to take up the mantle of Ash, and the greatest lesson that Ash can teach us is that great horror protagonists aren't made from scratch.
Groovy.
They aren't born purely on a page. They emerge organically through how they survive the horror surrounding them. Look back at the original Evil Dead. Ash is a total blank slate with barely any backstory or discernible interests. But from there, he became one of the most iconic characters of horror cinema.
Hail to the king, baby.
This evolution admittedly takes time, and Mia from the 2013 film had the potential to be a good successor to Ash, but it didn't happen. And Beth from Evil Dead Rise has that potential too, but something tells me that won't happen either. Point is, when conceiving these new Evil Dead protagonists, they get too hung up on coming up with internal demons for the main characters that define them. Mia's a drug addict and Beth is pregnant, and trying to have some elevated horror bullshit happen where their encounter with the Deadites acts as a parable that helps them overcome said problems. But the only internal problem that Ash had that made him so endearing is just that he's a jerk.
I never even saw these assholes before.
A lovable, relatable jerk.
What of all the sweet words that you spoke in private?
Well, that's just what we call pillow talk, baby.
I mean, what's the next female Evil Dead protagonist going to have to deal with? Overcoming domestic violence? I mean, dear Lord, lighten up a little bit.
Don't you get it? It's over.
I can't believe I'm never gonna speak to you again.
I've admittedly been hung up on the characters and the writing of Evil Dead Rise, but it's my only real gripe with the movie, so I might as well get it out of the way right away. And at the end of the day, the writing isn't the draw of an Evil Dead film. It's the undead and the gory violence they unleash, and like I said before, Evil Dead Rise delivers vividly in both departments. The standout performance of the film is Alyssa Sutherland as Ellie, an expansion of the concept of Henrietta from Evil Dead 2. What if your mother was possessed by an evil demon? Well, I guess most people already have mothers that are demons, but still, how Evil Dead 2 did that was pretty freaky.
Once in my fruit cellar.
But that premise wasn't as explored like it is in Evil Dead Rise. The person who brought you into this world wants to take you out of it. And Sutherland's performance as essentially the main antagonist makes for one of the greatest Deadite performances in the franchise's history, up there with Ellen Sandweiss, Ted Raimi, and Jane Levy.
Nothing a big old kiss from you won't fix.
For much of the film, Ellie's the only Deadite, but she's more than enough to sustain interest as a terrifyingly unpredictable threat.
Everybody here dies by dawn, Beth.
The gore itself in the movie is also top-notch, true to its Evil Dead namesake. Lots of gross imagery like a girl getting scalped, glass being eaten, tons of puke, eyes popping out, and of course, worst of all for some people, a cheese grater to the leg. I guess a successor to the pencil in the foot from the original Evil Dead. Savage as fuck! I've actually seen some people say the gore in Evil Dead Rise goes too far and is even unnecessary, and I'm just like, this is a fucking Evil Dead movie. It's all about gross out, gory gags. At one point in the TV show, Ash gets his head stuck in a Deadite's ass, for God's sake.
Oh god! Oh god, I'm in the butt!
If anything, I feel like Evil Dead Rise didn't go far enough with the gore compared to its predecessors. But, you know, it's dealing much more with minors, and especially has a little girl in most of the movie. I can understand holding itself back a bit more, and it feels like a good entry point to the series. You don't need any familiarity with the previous films, and it doesn't hit you as hard as some of the previous films. Evil Dead Rise surprisingly hinges much more on atmosphere and mood, building up tension, and it captures the style of the original two Evil Dead films really well. Unlike the previous films, minus Army of Darkness of course, Evil Dead Rise doesn't take place in a cabin, besides the opening scenes. The rest of it exclusively takes place in an apartment building in Los Angeles, and you'd think you'd lose the sense of isolation taking Evil Dead to the big city, but this derelict building makes for a very moody, claustrophobic setting brimming with atmosphere and mystery. The lighting, the set design, the framing of the shots, the score, the sound design, it's just an incredible looking and sounding horror film. The experience of watching this movie was like being on a really immersive haunted house ride, like the Haunted Mansion or Tower of Terror at Disney World, but with significantly more violence and gore. That's something I did appreciate about Evil Dead Rise compared to the 2013 film. It much more readily embraces the goofy charms of the Raimi films, where you can have talking decapitated heads or deadites flying around, along with some of the more splatstick violence of the classic films. Evil Dead Rise is still very restrained in the campiness department compared to a Raimi film, but it's a step in the right direction as an Evil Dead movie.
We live still!
Alright, here's where I briefly discuss the end of Evil Dead Rise. If you want to avoid spoilers and hear my final thoughts, skip to this time code. I was a little let down by the final act of Evil Dead Rise. There was a lot of build-up with high stakes, but the movie ends in a kinda ho-hum way where Beth and Cassie have to escape the apartment building finally through the parking area, but they're pursued by a fusion of all the Deadites in the building. And I was expecting the final creature to look fucking nuts, a huge scary monster like a fleshy Voltron or something. But it just kinda looked like an awkward blob of heads and limbs that probably would have been more formidable as separate entities instead of one thing. The final monster grabs Cassie and very slowly makes its way to killing the little girl, giving all the time in the world for Beth to chainsaw the monster up and banish it into a nearby wood chipper conveniently placed in this LA apartment's garage. It just felt like the most simplistic, cliched horror movie ending possible, especially compared to how crazy Evil Dead final acts often get. Hell, there have been single half-hour episodes of Ash vs. Evil Dead that ended in wilder, more action-packed ways than this movie. There's also an epilogue that sets up how the opening Deadite girl gets possessed to begin with, in what is technically the actual ending. I don't know, I guess I was just hoping to see something wilder, more action-packed and complicated in the final act than just wood-chippering all the Deadites who have conveniently combined into one creature, and the two survivors just walking away from it. At least send somebody back in time. Evil Dead Rise overall is a solid entry in this much storied franchise. The Deadites are cool, the gore is great, the movie looks fantastic, it's just the characters and writing that's weak, which isn't such a big deal with a movie like this, especially when the performances make up for it, but it definitely gets let down in the simplistic final act. Still, I had a groovy time watching the movie, and I think most Evil Dead fans will be pleased as well. I give Evil Dead Rise a Staffney out of Ashy Slashy.
What will be, will be.
While I still have your attention, check out my zombie servant Goulash's new YouTube videos on the Gulag channel, including complete reviews of all the Addams Family movies, and he'll have some more videos soon, including a review of Scooby-Doo The Mystery Begins, featuring me. Subscribe to the Gulag channel today. I command it. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.